There is a dog in Japan named Hachiko. Every single day for 9 years, he walked to the train station and waited for his owner to come home. His owner had died. Hachiko didn't know that. Or maybe he did know, and he went anyway, because the waiting was all he had left. That story has made millions of people cry since 1925, and most of those people couldn't tell you exactly why. It's a dog. It's just a dog. And yet something in that story reaches into your chest and grabs something that doesn't have a name. This video is about what that thing is. Because the question of whether animals experience loneliness, real, genuine, neurologically measurable loneliness, is not a sentimental question. It is one of the most important scientific questions of the last 50 years. And the answer has been quietly rewriting everything we thought we knew about consciousness, about emotion, and about what it actually means to need another living creature. By the time this video ends, you will never look at an animal alone in a room the same way again. Let's start with what loneliness actually is. Not the feeling, the biology, because loneliness isn't an emotion in the way sadness or anger are emotions. It's a survival signal. John Hachiko, the neuroscientist who spent 30 years studying loneliness at the University of Chicago, described it as a biological alarm system, the social equivalent of hunger or thirst. When you haven't eaten, your body sends a signal that says find food or you will die. When you haven't had water, your body sends a signal that says find water or you will die. When you haven't had meaningful social contact, your body sends a signal that says find connection or you will die. And the critical word there is will. Prolonged social isolation doesn't just feel bad, it kills. It raises cortisol levels, it suppresses immune function, it increases inflammation markers, it accelerates cognitive decline. Loneliness in humans is more dangerous to long-term health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That is not a metaphor. That is a measured, replicated, peer-reviewed finding. The body treats social disconnection as a mortal threat because for most of our evolutionary history, it was one. Now here is the question that changes everything. If loneliness is a biological survival signal, if it's wired into the nervous system as a response to social deprivation, why would we assume it only exists in humans? The neural architecture that produces loneliness didn't appear from nowhere when Homo sapiens evolved. It was built on top of older systems. Much older systems that were already present in the mammals that preceded us. And when researchers started actually looking for those systems in other animals, what they found was not ambiguous. Elephants. Let's start with elephants because the evidence is overwhelming and has been for decades. Elephants live in complex matriarchal social groups. They maintain relationships with specific individuals across decades. They demonstrate what can only be described as grief when a group member dies, standing over the body, touching it with their trunks, returning to the site of death for years afterward. But what happens to an elephant that is separated from its group? Researchers studying elephants in captivity and in the wild have documented a consistent behavioral profile: reduced activity, social withdrawal, the elephant isolating itself further even from remaining companions. Repetitive stereotypic behaviors, swaying, head bobbing, pacing, that are now understood as indicators of chronic psychological distress. Elevated cortisol, suppressed immune markers, the physiological signature of loneliness measured in blood and behavior. An elephant alone is not fine. An elephant alone is suffering in ways that are now biologically documented. Now let's talk about something closer to home: dogs, the animal that has spent more time with humans than any other species on Earth. Dogs were domesticated somewhere between 15 and 40,000 years ago. The timeline is still debated, but the fact is not. And in that time, they did not just learn to live with humans, they evolved to need us. The domestic dog has neurological changes that no wild canid has, changes that make them specifically attuned to human social cues, human faces, human emotional states. A dog looking into your eyes is not performing affection. It is doing something neurologically real. The oxytocin spike that occurs when a dog and its owner make eye contact is documented and measurable in both the dog and the human simultaneously. The dog is not pretending to bond with you, it is bonding with you, using the same neurochemistry you use. And what that means is that when you leave and the dog is alone, it is not experiencing your absence the way a rock experiences the absence of sunlight. It is experiencing something with a measurable neurological and physiological signature. Elevated cortisol, increased heart rate, behavioral indicators of distress that begin within minutes of separation and can persist for hours. We have a name for this in dogs. We call it separation anxiety. But that clinical term sanitizes what is actually happening. What is actually happening is that an animal that evolved specifically to need human social contact is experiencing that need going unmet. That is not anxiety. That is loneliness. Primates. Because if you want to understand the depth of social need in animals, you have to look at our closest relatives. Harry Harlow's famous experiments in the 1950s and 60s, experiments that would never be approved today, demonstrated something so disturbing that they permanently changed how science thinks about social deprivation. Young rhesus monkeys separated from their mothers and raised in isolation developed severe, lasting psychological damage. Not behavioral quirks, damage. They couldn't form relationships. They showed persistent self-harming behaviors. They were socially incompetent in ways that couldn't be reversed even with later social exposure. The need for social contact in primates is not a preference. It is a developmental requirement. Its absence doesn't just cause distress. It causes damage that rewires the developing brain in ways that cannot be fully undone. And the reason this matters beyond primates is what it tells us about the evolutionary depth of social need. If our closest relatives require social contact for normal neurological development, if isolation in early life causes measurable structural changes in the primate brain, then social need is not a human invention. It is ancient, it is deep, and it is present in varying degrees across the entire mammalian family tree. Here is what all of this means. When you see an animal alone, a dog in an empty apartment, an elephant in a concrete enclosure, a parrot in a cage with no companion, you are not projecting human emotions onto them when you feel something catch in your chest. You are recognizing something real. You are seeing a biological social system running without the inputs it was designed to receive. You are seeing loneliness. Not the human version, not the human word, not the human experience exactly, but the same underlying biology. The same survival signal firing into silence. The same need going unmet. And here is the thing about needs. They don't stop because they go unmet. They get louder, they get more urgent, they express themselves in behavior, in physiology, in the slow accumulation of biological damage that sustained social deprivation produces in every mammal that has ever been studied. Hachiko waited at that train station for 9 years. And you cried when you heard that story because somewhere in your nervous system, underneath language, underneath the rational understanding that it's just a dog, you recognized the signal. You knew what the waiting meant because your nervous system speaks the same language. It always has.